Hey, TJ.
Hey Jen, how are you?
I don't know. So, we're going to talk about today. We'll see after this. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
today how your words can cost you $16 million. Do you have
62 million.
62? Like, I can't even
Yeah, don't
read it. I'm
short us.
so. What happened? What are we talking about?
We're talking about Opendoor, the iBuying platform, being fined $62 million by the FTC. That's a
Yeah.
big number.
That's a big number. And we're talking about this. I think we need to tell people what Opendoor is if they're not sure, which would be weird, but let's just tell them anyway and what happened. But I think we wanted to talk about this because the FTC is also coming after realtors.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, they basically what they're trying to do is protect the consumer, which is a good thing. And Open Door, just give you the quick, like 30-second explanation. Open Door is what's called an iBuyer, which
Hmm.
means that they buy homes based on data they collect. So they price a home based on data
Like
solely,
an
not
algorithm, whatever.
algorithms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we saw Zillow doing this. They've since stopped. Um, Zillow was overpaying for homes. Turns out, Opendoor, on the other hand, was underpaying for homes. And so what? Why did it cost them 62 million? Well, here's
Right.
why. They were lying to consumers, is what the FTC says. So
Don't lie.
don't lie, right? So what they would say to a seller is, "Hey, we can give you $300,000. If you were to go to market, you'd only get 275, so you'd be foolish not to sell to us."
Right. And here's how it's cheaper also to sell to us,
Correct.
which it
So
wasn't.
instead of paying those big real estate commissions with us, you only pay this amount of commission. They didn't disclose all these big fees that actually put it at about 10%, I believe is where it comes out to.
Nothing in there.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so ultimately it comes down to they were being dishonest with consumers, according to the FTC. And for that, they were charged $62 million, which is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but when I read that, like obviously transparency is important. And I think as it relates to real estate agents, and one of the things that the FTC is looking at for real estate agents is I have heard in my lifetime, and I'm sure you've heard it too, people that represent buyers say, well, it's free for you to use an agent.
Yes.
Is that true? And this is like in line with that. So Open Door, was they've been fined to pay this. They were lying to consumers saying it's cheaper and it wasn't, right? So
Correct.
what do you think about that, like as it relates to real estate agents?
Yeah, so this was extremely common. I mean, it's probably still common, but it wasn't a thing when I came into the industry. It was very common for buyers agents to say, "Hey, I'm free to use. Sellers
Yeah.
pay commissions. It's free for you to use a buyer's agent."
Which
Now,
is like
in
true, right? Like the seller pays the commission and then they authorize the listing broker to share it and share a certain portion of it to the anybody that brings a buyer. So like,
yeah,
yes, it
sometimes, right?
right,
So the whole thing was, and this is where the lawsuit is coming from, is that's not written in stone. That's just how it's often done. So there's no rule that says sellers pay all the commissions. There's
mhm,
no rule that says buyers don't pay their agent.
right,
These are all just norms that have kind of been there. And what we're seeing now is the FTC is saying, "Hey, number one, it may not be fair.
right,
Number two, nothing's free. So let's get the
right,
word free out of there." And ultimately, like if we reverse engineer this, the buyers pay for everything. That's where the
right,
money comes from.
right.
So, it's just, I think we've got to be really careful to not be dishonest unintentionally.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
and based on what I see and from what we've read, I don't know that the Open Door intentions were unintentional. Let's meaning like what your fees are, what the market says a house is worth if you're
Yeah.
especially with the data that they have. So I see there that it likely was a choice to be slightly deceptive. That's my opinion on
I
this
believe
situation.
the FTC also thought that, which hence the fine. But I
Yeah,
think I think we actually fought about this on the Real Estate Fight Club podcast. Well, in sort of, we said, should the buyers pay their own agent, right?
yeah,
Separately outside, where the seller has an agreement to pay the agent, the listing agent, based on, what they're going to do, and then the buyer has the agreement. And like, what you had made some really good points about what it would be like if that paradigm kind of shifted, right?
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
what, give us some of your points that you had made in the podcast.
Yeah, so my biggest issues is there's two. Number one, I think it ultimately affects the lowest end of the market, which are FHA, VA, and first time home buyers are going to be the ones that would be most affected by having to come up with additional money. Um,
Based on current lending practices.
Correct. And I have a hard time believing that a lender is going to loan money to pay someone. It's very unlikely. It just doesn't make banking sense. So my mind says, even though that sounds nice, I doubt that it will ever be a practice.
Because you're saying that, well, you're saying that there's like, I think the theory makes sense though. Like, I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me that you hire your own representation, you pay for the representation, right? And so in this case, the seller hires the listing agent, the buyer hires the buyer's agent. But what you're saying is, okay, if that happens, and let's say, the buyer agent charges whatever, that either the buyer has to come up with that additional money, or it gets added to the loan, which means the bank will lend on it.
Yeah.
And then you have an potential appraisal issue, because now it has to appraise for higher, like the person's fee plus.
Yeah. Doesn't make a ton of sense. And here's the fear, right? Even though, like, and again, we don't live in ideology. It's got to be a real thing. It's got to actually be done. The fear is, by making that change, all of a sudden we're shifting more to the European and Australian model, where buyer's representation doesn't exist. And I would argue that that hurts the consumer so much more than an additional 3% or 2% or 1%.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that, I think we agree, like, people should be represented, right? Like, this is going to be likely your largest asset. You should have representation. I mean, that makes sense every day.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think as agents, we have two really important jobs if we want to be successful. Number one, we've got to be able to show our value. The money only matters if we don't have value there. So if we can prove our value, which I think we can do if we do our jobs at a high level, this isn't a conversation.
You can absolutely prove your value. I mean, yes, but it also starts with knowing what your value is and then having a consultation with them as well.
Yes, we've got to treat ourselves like professionals if we want to be treated like professionals.
Let me ask you, so what should agents be saying to buyers to explain how they get paid? What do you say?
Yeah, so in a traditional sense, what I describe is I basically ignore the fact that the where the money comes from doesn't matter. I believe that I present myself in a way where I can justify any amount of money within reason. And what I go through is that if you go through the process and you explain the hurdles, okay, because I look at inspections and appraisal and financing, those are all just hurdles.
Right.
And
finding a house, hurdle.
yes, right. I mean, it gets us there. And my whole thing is, look, I run this race 60 times a year. I know how to jump these hurdles. And you don't want to practice the first time you ever swing a baseball bat. You don't want it to be at the World Series. And that's what's happening.
That's a good way to talk about it. I love it.
And that's what's happening when we go and we represent ourselves. Like, this is not easy. It's just, if you do it well, it feels seamless, but it's not easy. And those hurdles are the key. It's not about finding a home. That's the easy part.
Right.
It's about racing the race without tripping over the hurdles. And that's where I come in. Without getting into detail, I think that 30-second snippet tells the story.
I agree. And then, I mean, it is true what you're saying. Like the seller will accept, reject, or counter their offer based on their expenses. The way that the seller and the listing brokerage agreed was that they would pay a portion of the listing agent's fee to me to bring you. But they're
Yes.
going to consider that expense as they look at offers.
Yes.
That's how I'm getting paid in this transaction. Now there will be some transactions where they are offering maybe less than the charge that we're going to agree to. So in that case, we'll have to figure out, we'll talk to your lender, we'll figure out how to come up with those additional funds because,
Yeah.
by hiring me, you're agreeing to this fee.
Yeah. And guess what? Clients, it's not a big deal. They don't care. They get it. We
No, they
make it
don't
a big
care,
deal.
says the
They don't
guy in
care.
custom suits that drives a Tesla. It's never about the money,
It's
man.
never about the money.
Like I drive an Acura. It's the same thing as what is it? I used to drive a Lexus. It's a Toyota, right?
Yeah. Yeah. An Acura is a Nissan.
It's never about the money, ever, ever, ever. So charge what you think is fair for your services. That's it.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. And if you're not sure how to present that value, that's something that just takes practice and role play. And let me tell you, that will make you a lot more money if you can tell that story well and with confidence. I think
Yeah.
sometimes people, I've heard newer agents just kind of trip through it, and I'm listening like, oh, that wouldn't make me feel confident.
Yeah.
So if you're getting kind of pushback, it's probably not the words you're saying, it's how you're saying them. And that's just practice. And that's why teams, coaching, these are the things that we like preach so big because it really can change your career.
Yeah. Well, and I know for you, you're looking to hire inside of your group. So if
Yeah.
people either want to practice and role play with you, have some questions, are looking to join a group, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, call or text 513-379-2000. Yeah, I'm always looking for ways to improve myself, help others improve themselves. So it'll be a win-win.
The big question on everybody's mind is, are you currently in prison with your cement blocks?
I am doing a 30-day stint. I should get out soon. No, this is an office. It is a little rough. Look, I can prove it. There's no
You
TV.
can prove it. You're allowed out at your free
Yeah.
will. Okay,
Yeah.
I got you. It's okay. I'm in the basement of a co-working space.
Yeah, we're in the
Just
co-working. Oh, yours looks fancy though.
mine is fancy. I'm in Hyde Park. Where are you?
I am in Mason.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, TJ. I appreciate you being on.
Thanks, Jen. Talk soon.
See ya.
Bye.